Hello everyone, this is GrayMatter with GrayMatter Tutorials, and today I want to go ahead and start a tutorial series on a topic that I think is typically overlooked when it comes to smaller game development studios, and that's localization. So what is localization? First off, localization is the ability for a game developer to cast a really large net when it comes to marketing. But that doesn't tell you what it necessarily is. Localization is the ability for the resources of the game to adapt to the user's locale. What does that mean? Well, if you develop in the United States, like I do, I would develop with English as my primary language. So I would have all of the buttons and navigation through the app be referred to in an English context. So for instance, there's a play button. Well, someone in Spain who speaks Spanish and not English and doesn't know a lick of English won't understand what that play button means. Maybe they'll know it is the play button if that's the only button on the screen, but odds are they won't be able to navigate through the app as successfully as someone who lives in the United States. They might still play your app, but due to the frustration of not being able to read anything, they might not enjoy it as much. So localization really conquers in this area because it will allow the game to decide what is the locale of the user. And then based off of that information, it loads up a resource file. And that resource file contains the resources, such as the strings, for the game, and then puts them into the user interface and changes. So like if I were to have hello be on the screen, well, it would say hello in English, but it would say hola in Spanish. So instead of a Spanish person being greeted saying hello, it would say hola, which is exactly what we want. And I had created, before I had a major overhaul of all my social media involving GrayMatter tutorials, I had a multi-language support system created. It's a tutorial series, but it's no longer existing, so don't worry about looking it up. It might exist because everything that you put on the internet exists, but I don't think it does. I deleted it a while ago. So I went ahead and redid it, but it was definitely one of my most popular YouTube series, probably because you didn't find too much of it around. But I want to say that I improved on the design and actually am using something inside of C# called the Resource Manager, which is part of the system.resources namespace. I don't know. I don't remember what it was exactly. I'm relatively new to it as well, so don't bite my head off if I get that wrong. But either way, so I'm going to show you how you can actually utilize the Resource Manager inside your own game by using a utility class. It's a helper class that I created. It allows you to use the Resource Manager and the Resource Writer. Resource Writer will typically be done inside of an editor, which we won't be getting to in this tutorial series. And then a Resource Manager will allow you to load up the information and stuff like that, which we will cover. And I am happy to announce that it does have Android support, which my last multi-support system did not. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, here we are inside of Unity, and I want to go ahead and explain the folder structure I have set up here. If you've watched any of my other tutorials, you know that the way that I set up my folder structure helps with creating my namespaces. So we'll obviously have the GrayMatter namespace inside the root folder, and then I have a scripts folder. This is typically left out of any of the namespaces. It's almost pointless to include it. But then the next folder that follows that will typically be whatever sub-root of the namespace it actually is. So this would be graymatter.monosbehaviors.ui. And then this would be graymatter.utilities. I typically have a source folder, but I know that I'm not actually going to have any source files inside of this tutorial series, so I'm going to exclude that. And then lastly, you have the streaming assets folder, which we're going to be utilizing through application.streamingassetspath, which is provided by Unity Engine as far as referencing the streaming assets folder on any device. And then I have a subfolder of that called res, which we're going to be keeping resource files in. You could use the resources folder, but I've been advised several times looking up online to avoid using that, and so I don't. But then I also have the build settings in Android. You don't have to do this if you're not going to be developing for Android, but later on I showcase that this does in fact work on Android. So I went ahead and put this into an Android project. And then nothing's in the scene yet, but we will be creating stuff in the scene in the next video. So for now, let's just go ahead and create the files of our class, and in the next video we'll actually populate them. So this one is going to be localized text. Sorry about that. Go back to Unity. Okay, and this one is going to be resource helper. So typically any of the any of the utility classes I create, it's whatever they're actually helping with and then the word helper after them. That just helps me distinguish them later if the namespace isn't enough to distinguish them. So that's typically how I name everything. You can go ahead and name it however you'd like. But just to explain what these classes will do, the resource helper will be a wrapper class around a resource manager and a resource writer. So it's going to be combining that and making them easy functions for you. And the reason we have it as a helper class is because we're going to be using some Unity engine related stuff to actually work with the resource manager. And that'll be pretty cool. So make sure you check out that video. But the very first video is going to, well, one following this, so technically the second video, is going to be about the localized text, and I'm going to explain how that gets used and stuff like that in the next video. So go ahead and see, so I'll go ahead and see you then.